Well, so then if we let the scales of cultural values fall from our eyes and try not to look at the world through the eyes of science or democracy or capitalism or Christianity, what is there beyond ideology? What are the facts of the matter? As I see it, the most visible facts on the surface of things, on the surface of being, I see the law of increasing complexity. Things have gotten more complicated through time. I have never met anyone who could successfully argue against this. That doesn't mean it's true, but it means that it may be, as Wittgenstein used to say, true enough. True enough that as you approach the present moment in the only area of the universe which we have accurate data about, which is this planet, things become more complicated. 1,000,000 years ago, there were no human civilizations. 1,000 years ago, there were no machines to speak of. 100 years ago, there was no communication infrastructure to speak of. 10 years ago, there was no internet. 18 months ago, there was no Java. Things are complexifying, intensifying, moving together. This is the universal drama that is reaching culmination in our lifetimes. Because, and I offer this, don't believe me, for God's sake. Don't believe anybody. Just take this stuff in and then measure it against your own experience. The second extracultural fact that I've been able to discern, the first being things get more complicated as you approach the present, and the second being that process of complexification is occurring faster and faster. The early universe was very slow moving. It took a long time for things to cool down and life to begin its agonizing march out of the slime into animal form, meeting extinction and catastrophe and setback after setback, but always picking itself up literally out of the mud and moving forward. Well, as life left the ocean, the pace of evolution quickened. As life radiated across the land, the number of phyla multiplied, the number of species multiplied. Finally, 1,000,000 years ago, pick a number, 1.5 million years ago, the higher primates begin to use tools. Fire enters the picture. And just as an aside, isn't it interesting how long people used tools and fire before spoken language enters the picture? I mean, we possess tools 1,000,000 years old, human tools. Language, 35,000 years old. When I was in South Africa last year, I was in this place that reminded me of, like, the Four Corners area around Moab, Utah. It was like nothing like I had expected South Africa to be. And when I wasn't teaching, I would wander the dry arroyos and hunt for human tools. And there was an archaeologist staying in the bar, or in the hotel there, and we would drink in the evening in the bar, and I would lay my day's find out on the bar, and he would sort it into piles. And he'd say, nothing in this pile is less than 165,000 years old. Everything in this pile is from human tools we're talking about. Now I've lost my thread because I was so thrilled with my sidebar. I think I can get it back. Ah, yeah, here it is. Here it is. And they say potheads can't think. Here it is. The second obvious fact which haunts the post-cultural viewpoint is this acceleration of change. And I've sort of built my career on this because I'm a rationalist, but I feel the emotional power of this thing. We are caught in a basin of attraction, to use a mathematical term. In other words, we are under the influence of something which is pulling us into the future, or into novelty, if you want to put it that way, at a faster and faster rate. So problems which are presented in the following terms. If we don't do something, in 500 years we will run out of this, that, or the other. Or if we don't do something, in 1,000 years this or that will happen. These are meaningless statistics because the acceleration into novelty is rewriting the rules now every 18 months. We are descending now into a well of novelty such that more change is now occurring in a single human lifetime than occurred in the previous 10,000 years of human history. We are approaching at a faster and faster rate something unthinkable, something which is sculpting us in its image, something which shamans have always known was there, though they may not have used the metaphor of ahead of us in time. That's a Western download of where it is, because you could just as well say it's in heaven, or behind us in time, or everywhere, or nowhere. The point is, we're about to arrive in its presence, and it is shaping us to prepare us for the arrival. It is making us more and more in its image. This is not a new process. This began a long, long time ago, but it's now reaching its culmination. And I said a few minutes ago, the Internet is light at the end of the tunnel. The Internet is the beginning of a nervous system that is knitting not only all human beings, but all life together, all information together. Because, you know, there already is an Internet. It's called the Integrated Ecosystem of Planet 3. It runs on pheromones, it runs on weather systems, ocean tides, telluric currents moving in the earth, thousands of methods. Leave it that way because our cultural tradition is one of reductionism. Tear things apart, break them into their subordinate units, break those into still smaller units. Well, when you have a theory of reality like that, what you end up with is all the pieces spread out and no car and nowhere to go. But nature has always operated as an integrated system of communication. And the Internet is, in a sense, nothing more than a human aping of a natural system already in place. If we could do it through pheromones, light, mycelium, and electromagnetic pulses through the earth, we wouldn't be stringing copper and cable and fiber optic. Those things are simply historical artifacts of the moment. What lies ahead on the Internet, what lies ahead, I think, for us, and this is the last point I really want to make, and then we can talk about all this, is, you know, I have been a true resistor of the alien penetration of human civilization because I just saw no evidence for it. But the chant that they are coming has now grown so loud that I feel like one sort of has to ask oneself, well, short of just 100% skepticism, what the hell is going on with this alien hype? And I think that the problem is one of modeling and intelligence. There is an alien. We are in the cultural process of meeting this alien, but they do not come in 1,000-ton beryllium ships from Zeneb-el-Ganubi to trade high technology for human fetal tissue. I mean, that's an intelligence test, folks. That's not how it works. Our own hysteria makes it very difficult for us to deal with the presence of the alien, and the alien knows that. That's why it has disguised itself as a psychedelic experience, I think. Where, you know how in all those 50s B science fiction movies, there was always this theme of the landing area. And I saw it in Mars Attacks, too. There must be a landing zone. Somehow we must let them know that we welcome them by building a landing area. And the Nazca Plain has been claimed, and on and on and on. I think that the alien is a creature of pure information. It's purely information. It's non-local. It comes out of the Bell non-locality part of the universe that exists distributed through hyperspace. The alien is real, but it is only made of information. And therefore, the only dimension in which it can be encountered is a dimension of pure information. Fortunately, we are building a dimension of pure information. Providentially, we have named it the net. The net is a net for catching the alien mind. How will it come? Will it descend upon our websites in a flash of light? I don't think so. How it will come is hacked through human fingers. The alien is real, but it is within us. It can only communicate information, and that information has to be made real in this world by human coders. So if we were to set out lightheartedly to build a virtual reality as alien as we could make it, I maintain that 3/4 of the way our hair would be standing on end, because we would realize we are not inventing this. We are discovering it. You know, Michelangelo said, the form is in the block of marble. What I do is I take away the part that is unnecessary and reveal the human torso within the block of marble. In the same way, the alien is already within us, but we must model it. We must call it forth into a dimension of potential dialogue. And I think that ultimately this is what high-tech society can bring to the shamanic equation. Shamans have been dealing with spirits, entities, powers for more than 100,000 years. But it has always been on a one-to-one basis. One human being at a time went up Mount Sinai to talk to the fire on the mountain. But with virtual reality, we have a technology that allows us to show each other our dreams and, yes, our hallucinations. And as we begin to show each other the contents of our own heads, and as we begin to explore the alien Niagaras of beauty that pour through your consciousness under the influence of some of these substances, we are going to discover that we are not what we thought we were. The monkey flesh is penetrated by something, dare I say it, divine, or at least alien, transplanetary, and beyond the power of human comprehension. I don't know if we're talking about God Almighty here. I don't know if we're talking about the God who hung the stars like lamps in heaven, as Milton says. That seems a tall order. Maybe what we're talking about is the God of biology. Something has happened to this planet. It has become infected with an informational, call it virus, call it force, call it being, that is using matter, and yes, using our flesh and our thoughts to bootstrap itself to higher and higher levels. And now the prosthesis of machinery and the possibility of an artificial intelligence raises the real option of producing, of actually midwifing the birth of an entirely new, not species, but order of biological and intelligence in existence. The human-machine symbiote is upon us. I mean, it's been with us for a while, since the first wheel was carved, since the first stick was sharpened. But that was all very simple stuff. Now it's clear that we are in partnership with an other mind which comes to us through our machineries and through the biosphere. Wherever we press beyond the thin curtain of rationalist culture, we discover the incredibly rich, erotic, scary, promising presence of this intelligent other, which beckons us out of history and says, the galaxy lies waiting. A galaxy of galaxies lie waiting. Lose the encumbrances of three-dimensional space. Return with the word to its higher and hidden source. And at that point, you will discover the alchemical paraclete will be given unto you. The alchemical dispensation will be given. And as James Joyce said, man will be dirigible. What did he mean? He meant that we will lose the limitations of physical and three-dimensional space, that we are destined to become mental creatures. People say, well, isn't this a terrible thing? What about this, that, and the other? All the things you're worrying about, we turned our back on 25,000 years ago. We have been marching through this virtual reality of our own creation for the entire duration of what is called human history. Now, is there a political implication to all of this? I think the political implication is, a personal one. We all must try to understand what is happening. We need to try to understand what is happening. And in my humble opinion, ideology is only going to get in your way. Nobody understands what is happening. Not Buddhists, not Christians, not government scientists, not, no one understands what is happening. So forget ideologies. They betray, they limit, they lead astray. Just deal with the raw data and trust yourself. Nobody is smarter than you are. And what if they are? What good is their understanding doing you? People who walk around saying, well, I don't understand quantum physics, but somewhere somebody understands it. That's not a very helpful attitude toward preserving the insights of quantum physics. Inform yourself. What does inform yourself mean? It means, A, transcend and mistrust ideology. Go for direct experience. What do you think when you face the waterfall? What do you think when you have sex? What do you think when you take psilocybin? Everything else is unconfirmable rumor, useless, probably lies. So liberate yourself from the illusion of culture. Take responsibility for what you think and what you do. And then the other political implication toward community is a lot of people are going to be very anxious because change raises anxiety in people. And people who have limited opportunities to educate themselves because of culturally inflicted abuse are scared because they can sense that everything familiar is giving way, but they don't want to embrace the unimaginable. These people need to be reassured. They need to be reassured by example and by hearing optimistic and reasonable rhetoric about the future. Selling the future as an 8-alarm fire, which is how the media does it, only makes a sane future impossible. So we need a responsible approach to thinking about the future. And it means taking personal responsibility for your drug taking, for the ideas, the memes that you push into society, and for the images that we share among ourselves. You know, one of the great truisms of the New Age is that images can heal. But I've never heard anybody discuss the obvious contra-implication, which is images can make you sick. And you are constantly bombarded with images which disempower, divide, confuse, and make crazy, basically. So I think the reason psychedelics are such political dynamite in any culture is because they dissolve cultural assumptions. The scales fall from people's eyes, and they say, does this make sense? Does my job make sense? Does my relationship make sense? To my significant other? To my government? To my children? To my environment? Do these relationships make sense? And of course, if the answer for most people in high-tech society is no. We've been compromised, we've been deluded, we've been sold a massive pottage. The way out, then, is personal responsibility, new operating systems downloaded from outside of culture, which means from the deeper wisdom of the psychedelic plants, and then a commitment to community and a motto of to the future without fear. Without fear. Thank you very much. Well, so much for a promise to be brief. You just wind the guy up and point him, and off he goes. The robot who preaches freedom. Questions, challenge, anything, anybody? Yeah, you. Well, yeah, it's a tricky question because what's being maximized as things come together is novelty. And so then we have to have a discussion about what is novelty. To my mind, an explosion takes a complicated situation and reduces, or as mathematicians would say, flattens its dimensionality. An art gallery or a beautiful home is far more interesting before an explosion than after. So I don't see how some kind of catastrophe would entirely fulfill the bill. On the other hand, a partial catastrophe of some sort, because I believe primates are at their best when cornered. And we aren't cornered yet. I mean, we talk about how we're cornered. People say this is the end of the world. This ain't the end of the world. This is the long garden party before the end of the world, with strolling musicians and superbly catered food and women in diaphanous gowns and high-toned conversation. Wait till you see the end of the world. It isn't about deciding to come up to Austin to attend the Whole Life Expo, let me tell you. So, yes. Yes, I should repeat questions. Different part of the room. Back here. White shirt. You, sir. This guy, yeah. Yes, you eloquently represent the position that language was invented in order to lie, right? Well, that's what the second guy who got a hold of it, I'm sure, probably did with it. You're right that I have an incredible enthusiasm for verbal speech, but it's only because it's easy for me to do. If I didn't do this, I'd have to find honest work. However, I am aware, I'm very aware of the limitations of language, and one of the things I've talked about a lot is what I call visible language. You used the example of telepathy, that if we were in telepathic communication, how could I lie? Because you would perceive my intent. The key to making language more true is to make it more visual. Now, that can't just take the form of a bigger vocabulary and more colorful metaphors. Like people will say, when he spoke, he painted a picture. Or listening to him was like watching a movie. I think ordinary speech goes through a series of stages, from articulate to eloquent to poetic to demagogic. And demagogic is where you want to be careful, because then you can turn, essentially Hitler turned history on its head with speeches. He just could really deliver a stem winder. I've been fascinated by the fact that in the Amazon, under the influence of ayahuasca, people sing songs, but they see the song they sing. And when you hear people talking about it afterwards, people will say, after listening to a song, I love the part with the olive drab and the chrome, but I thought when he got into the magenta and yellow stripe thing, it was just too much. Well, this is a critique of a song? And then when you take ayahuasca with these people, you discover to your amazement that is a blue ribbon a foot across that descends from floor to ceiling and has a yellow center, and then puts knobs in the ribbon, and you can start singing and building, modeling, animating in 3 dimensions with sound. Well, I maintain that our insistence technologically on pushing our media toward ever more immediate sensations, so that if we have photography, it's black and white, we demand color. If it's color, we demand motion. If it's motion, we demand sound. If it's sound and motion, we want 3D. It's that we trust our eyes. And the natural domain of communication is visual for human beings. We're like octopi in that way. So really, language needs to evolve toward the visual, and that's why I'm very keen for technically dense prosthetic environments where every time you say the word "and," a yellow 3-dimensional triangle appears in the air. Every time you say "or," an orange ball appears. A computer is listening to what you're saying and giving a geometric accompaniment to speech. I think that there are forms of telepathy that we can evolve through the use of drugs and computer-assisted technologies that will allow us to see each other's dreams. In spite of your correct assessment that I'm keen for the spoken word, I spend all summer learning modeling and 3-dimensional animation programs from my son because I want to animate. I want to model. I see things on my trips that I have never been able to English, but that if I were a fully competent modeler and animator, I would just say, check it out. And I'm going to do that, and I urge you to do that. I mean, it's a funny thing to be told you want to spiritually advance, study 3D animation. But these are the frontiers of communication. We have an obligation to make our language more immediate. It is the most godlike thing we do. If you're looking for the thumbprint of Almighty God on the biological organization of this planet, it is human language. It is a miracle. I don't give a hoot what the dolphins and the honeybees are out there in the woods doing. It ain't like Milton. It ain't even like Bob Dylan. It ain't even as good as this, I'm willing to say. No, human communication is what we are, and it will lead us to be a symbiotic species if we put the pedal to the metal. For people like yourselves, who I assume to be, no matter how you finagled your way in here this afternoon, part of the upper 3% of the ruling elite on this planet, there is a real obligation to use privilege to communicate and to make art. I think this is what, if the good life has any purpose other than to drink beer and watch TV, it's to produce art. This is how you make a payback into the community. And art is ambiguous. Your art may say things to people other than yourself that it would never say to you. But that's how we make the community richer. That's how we enlarge the dimensions of the human soul, by making art. Yeah. Stand up and yell. Louder. You said, do you take psilocybin and see self-transforming machine elves? No. Yeah? The question is, when you encounter the self-transforming machine elves in hyperspace, do you think that's a reflection of ourselves, or do you think it's an alien, or, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that? It's tricky, because we are not what we think we are. Maybe I didn't spend enough time on this alien thing. I referred to non-local domains of information. This has to do with this idea in quantum physics that there is something called Bell non-locality, that all particles that were ever associated remain associated in some mysterious way, no matter how far apart in time and space they have drifted. Well, according to the Big Bang, all particles were once closely associated. At the moment of the Big Bang, everything was in a space less than the diameter of the proton, or some piddling distance like that. So then this was an idea that was just thought so outlandish that there could be this instantaneous dimension of connectivity that it was dismissed from quantum physics in favor of an acceptance of a somewhat less outlandish but equally challenging notion, which was the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And that's how it was left for about 40 years. But there were thought experiments that people talked about that could test for this Bell non-locality. Well, eventually, these apparatus were actually built, and these experiments were performed. And what do you know, Joe? Bell non-locality can be demonstrated the same way any other physical phenomenon can be demonstrated, given a sufficiently prepared laboratory situation. It's real. It's not woo-woo. It's actually scientifically true at the fundamental core of physics that all space and all time is in some form of simultaneous connection. Now, it gets a little dicey if you ask questions like, can we use this to get and send information? And I don't want to go into that because I think I already have the answer. No matter how good the arguments against it, I believe this is what the human imagination is. That you have two eyes to show you local space, and then you have an organ called the mind, which doesn't protrude anywhere on the surface of your body, except occasionally in some cases. It will lodge on a surrogate. But generally the mind is invisible, but it gives you non-local data. That's what the imagination is. That's non-local data. Everything in the imagination is real, somewhere. somewhere so far away in space and time that it makes absolutely no sense to give it another thought ever again. Don't ever think that thought again, but know that everything in the imagination is real. So it's ridiculous to speak of my imagination or the human imagination. There is just the imagination. But see, if all information is there, 99.999% of that information is not intended for human beings and makes no sense whatsoever to us. It's basically static. It's either above or below our cognitive power to organize, and so it is meaningless. But 0.0000001% of this non-local data is enough like local data that we can make metaphoric bridges to it and say, well, it was like this, and it was sort of like this, and it was a kind of a this, and it reminded me of something else. And that's the stuff of the imagination. And to the degree that you can accept alien data without freaking out, you can go deeper into the imagination. I have a friend who says of psilocybin mushrooms, every time I take it, my goal is to stand more. And he doesn't mean stand more in terms of dosage. He means stand more in terms of content. Because it can always raise the bar higher than you can jump. I mean, I've had dialogues with it where after hours of dancing mice and personal revelations and kind of a sense of familiarity, I've said to it, well, but what are you really? Show me what you are for yourself. Well, my God, the temperature in the room begins to fall towards zero. Black draperies rise. There's an organ tone that shakes the earth. And after about 30 seconds, I say, hey, enough of what you are for yourself. Let's go back to the dancing mice and the little candies rolling in the dark. And, It knows that you have a limited capacity to absorb its alienness. That's why we have what's called human history. Human history is the process of standing more. And it's now we've sort of come to the short and curly part of the process where they're just around the corner. I mean, all you have to do is smoke a doobie, look out at the evening sky, have a dream, talk to a friend, and the alien is very, very, its trailing aura, or its leading aura, I guess. Its leading aura has now intersected human psychology. But cheerful stories of space brothers and scary, silly stories of fetal trading, high technology freaks in league with the government. Hey, it's so much bigger than that. It's so big that it has disguised itself as an alien invasion to keep from really alarming us with what it really is. How are we doing here? Couple more questions.
If you could come to the microphone so the tape recorder can pick it up.
A lady, yes. Would you like to come up and we'll get you on tape here?
I was just wondering what you thought about the possibility of, as we become more aware of what we're doing to the environment and the responsibility of those industrialized nations that are consuming more than their share, that if we could get on an equal playing field, then those underdeveloped countries that have a great deal of the resources that they're using up to basically pay their national debts, if they could receive technology so that they can be on an equal playing field on the internet, etc., in exchange for our consumption, that it might be an interesting evolution in terms of...
Well, I think it's happening. In other words, some people have objected that the internet and computers are an elitist technology in the hands of a bunch of white folks. To some degree, that's true, but on the other hand, if the automobile had followed the same curve of cost-benefit that the computer has followed in its development, then the average automobile today would cost $1.50, and it would go 100,000 miles on 10 cents worth of gas. That's the kind of bang for your buck you're getting from the modern PC compared to where it was 35 years ago. No technology in history has had its costs fall so quickly. And there is no reason to think that those costs will level off. If a good PC today is $1,400, there's no reason why in 5 years it shouldn't be $140, and there's no reason why in 10 years it shouldn't be $14 and be worn on your thumbnail. This can all be done. All these prices are artificially inflated. The other thing about the Internet is it is going wireless. And as it goes wireless, it goes totally global. If I can just brag for a minute and make an example of myself, I have a wireless connection to the Internet. At first, I got a wireless connection because I couldn't get any other kind because I lived way up on a volcano. But now, my wireless connection is 1 megabyte. That's 45 times faster than 28.8. The poor people down on copper, they can't do better than 56 because the infrastructure already exists and therefore limits the bandwidth. By going outside the infrastructure, this sounds like a reprise of my talk, by going outside the infrastructure and building alone from ground up, I suddenly find myself looking down the gun barrel of a T1 connection, and it is heaven itself, let me tell you. And the people who sold it to me, and there must be dozens of other companies, are bent on conquering the world, meaning putting everybody who wants to be online for pennies in the next 5 to 6 years. And, you know, if you live in Manhattan or even Austin, what is the Internet? It's another diversion. It's another piece of entertainment. But what is it like in Somalia, in Seychelles, in Bangalore? What kind of impact does it have there? It is, you talk about a culture-dissolving effect based on psychedelics. How about a culture-dissolving effect based on access to the Internet? And people say, well, Western values will swamp all others. Certainly, to some degree, that is true. But did that just begin yesterday? Isn't that what the bloody business has been about for 500 miserable years, ever since the barbarian Cortez arrived in Mexico? I think so. Well, don't get me off on that. One last question. Who's just burning? Anybody burning? There's somebody burning.
So, where do you think we're going to be on December 22nd, 2012?
All together. All together. It's a nice answer. Here's another one. Why have only one answer? It's too early to tell. In other words, asking that question in 1997 is like asking a man looking east at 1 a.m. what he thinks the sunrise will be like. It's just too early. The sun lies over the event horizon of the planet. In other words, we can't see around the corner yet. In terms of our analogous cultural development, right now we've reached approximately the year 1000 AD. And between now and 2012, at an incredibly accelerated rate, we have to do a number of things. Discover the new world, invent the calculus, have the Renaissance, then have the Reformation, then have the Industrial Reformation, then have the 20th century. All that has to be squeezed into the next 14 years. The real outlines of what is tearing toward us will probably be the province of squirrels and visionaries like myself until around 2004 and 5. And by that time, it will be clear to everyone what is on the end of every fork, as William Burroughs once said. In other words, it will be clear that history has been canceled. it will be clear that there is no human future except through hyperspatial breakthrough. We will all be walking around on an internet that is 90% VRML based and hence three-dimensional and interactive. And nanotechnology will be beginning to deliver its goods to society. New forms of propulsion system are going to move the outer planets to within a few weeks' travel, so forth and so on. So we cannot at this moment know the true nature of the eschaton, because at this moment, if we knew the true nature of the eschaton, it would shatter our cultural assumptions and our individual understanding completely. We have a lot of heavy lifting to do. There's a lot of self-education, hard tripping, and heroic dosing that needs to be done before we can meet the eschaton on a level playing field. Be there or be square. Thank you.